Okay, are you ready for this? So legend has it, I-4 is haunted.
They say that as you drive down this quarter-mile stretch of road in Sanford, Florida, you can see orbs of light crossing the highway. Some people have even reported seeing hitchhikers, but when they stop to pick them up, no one's there.
Cynthia, so they broke down numbers over a 5-year span, and they found that I-4 has the highest death per mile average of any highway in the U.S.
Since 1960, people have been reporting hauntings on this short section of road. It's been named the I-4 Dead Zone. It's also supposed to be one of the most deadly parts of this 132-mile interstate. But why?
What about this section makes it more haunted or deadly? The tragedy of traffic that happens around Disney?
There was little shock when they learned a recent study dubbed I-4 the deadliest highway in the nation.
Digging into the history of the area, I learned that in 1870, Henry Sanford purchased a bunch of land, like 640 acres on the shores of Lake Monroe. He wanted to sell it to European immigrants to make a Catholic community. He got Father Swemberg, a resident pastor, assigned to the Orlando area, and after selling a few of the plots, they put in a railroad, hoping that it would drive in more people to the area. But it didn't. Not because the area was bad, but the timing was bad. In 1887, 2 years after the St. Joseph's Catholic community was founded, yellow fever, aka Yellow Jack, began making its way through Florida. Starting in Key West, it moved into Tampa because Italian fruit vendors were buying fruit from the Caribbean where yellow fever was more common. So people back then associated yellow fever with warmer months, but that's about all they knew about it. What we know now is that it's spread by mosquito bites from the Aedes aegypti mosquito, which is the same one that keeps dengue fever in the news today. So the fever, by way of mosquito, made its way from the Keys to Tampa and then to the St. Joseph's community on the outskirts of Orlando and infected 4 people. Now that might not seem like a lot for a community, but there were only 4 families in this community, and all 4 people who got infected were in the same family. I assume something like an infected mosquito got into their home at night and bit a bunch of people while they were sleeping. So when the others saw that this family had 4 people who had gotten the fever and not knowing what caused it, the other families just packed up and left. And not just for like vacation, but for good. Like the land was tainted kind of left, which meant that this last family was alone in the abandoned community. They called for the local pastor to come and give the dying their last rites, but the father never showed up. He was called to Tampa to help out there with giving last rites to those dying in Tampa just a few days before. But the Tampa pastor was dead by the time Father Swemberg got there, and he only lasted a few days before he was infected and passed away himself. Just so we're on the same page here, last rites are usually given to Catholics as they're dying, not once they're dead. It's so their burden of sins can be forgiven before they leave this earth. As a pastor, this puts you around infected people who are on the brink of death, making it extra dangerous, especially when you don't know how to protect yourself from what they have. Seeing everyone else leave, this last family decided they need to leave the area too, and ended up burying their dead just north of the railroad tracks in the woods without any last rites. Only some wooden crosses marked the area, and then the last of the St. Joseph's Catholic community packed up and left the area. I guess they thought that the land or something was causing or spreading the fever, which they were kind of right about. So after the area was abandoned, the land changed hands a few times and it was cleared out and made into farmland by a guy named Warren. Well, everything but a little island where the 4 crosses were. He put some wire fences around the area to section it off, and then he sold the property to Albert Hawkins, who built a house on the edge of the cleared land. The Hawkins had 7 kids, which probably wasn't uncommon because more kids equals more hands to work the farm. But I'm gonna assume that there were a lot of toys in the Hawkins house, and having so many kids, they would notice that toys would randomly move around the house. Like things weren't where they left them, or they would disappear for a few days and then reappear kind of thing. So one day, Albert was out walking around the field and came across the burial island. Not knowing anything about them, he removed the crosses, which was pretty rotted by then. They'd been up for like 25 years and they were only made of wood. That night, a fire started in his house. Being superstitious, I mean, who wouldn't be when you have toys randomly moving around your house? So the only thing that Albert and his wife could think of was that the angry spirits caused the fire. He'd removed the crosses from the grave and his wife made sure that he put them back up. Over the next 50 years or so, Albert would rent out sections of the field to other farmers, but each time he would tell them, don't mess with the graves. He probably even told them what happened to him, so when he messed with them, everyone knew about it. So one day, one of the farmers decided that he didn't believe in the superstitions and he wanted to clear the area. He decided to start by removing the wire fence that was around the grave sites. But it wasn't more than a day later before his house caught fire and burnt down to the ground. So let's fast forward to the 1950s. The area is decently built up into a city. It's no longer just woods, but there are still patches of woods and fields. One of the areas that were left as woods was around the grave sites, located close to the edge of Lake Monroe. One afternoon, a little boy was out playing in the area and had the genius idea to dig up the graves. He started digging, but then it was getting close to dark and he needed to get home. The next night, while the boy was out, he was struck by a drunk driver and died due to his injuries. The driver was never identified or caught. It seems like every time someone messes with these graves, something bad happens to them. So the locals named the area the Field of the Dead. Around this time, the government was giving away free money to build interstates around the country. So Florida decided to build one from Tampa to Daytona. By then, Albert had been dead for about 10 years and his widow sold the property to the government, hoping that the road and Walt Disney would bring some life to the area. Soon people came out and marked up the land where the road would go and noted that the graves were in the way and would need to be relocated before construction starts. No biggie. But when construction actually started, someone made the brilliant decision that these graves weren't important enough to waste time on. I mean, it's not like they were Indian burial grounds or something. So let me set the scene a bit here. It's September 1960 and a big-ass hurricane called Donna is starting to hit the Keys on the bottom tip of Florida. But being Florida, we're used to hurricanes. So work doesn't stop until the winds and rains are a bigger concern than the daily thunderstorms. So the dump truck shows up with a full load of dirt to start filling the area and bring it up to grade. According to the legend, that day, September 11th, Hurricane Donna, which was supposed to go up the west coast of Florida and into Louisiana, made a right turn at Tampa and headed right over the grave sites. The eye of the storm passed within 10 miles of the actual graves. Coincidence? Fast forward to 1963, the day that this section of I-4 officially opened. Imagine an 18-wheeler hauling frozen shrimp is driving east down I-4, just cruising, when all of a sudden, as it's approaching the St. Johns River Bridge, it loses control and jackknifes. The legend says that this driver of the truck didn't make it, making him the first victim of the dead zone. What caused the driver to lose control of the truck? No idea. Locals say that it was the ghosts of the 4 people who were buried under this section of road, and they're trying to get people's attention or take revenge on people driving over their graves. Either way, locals say that this small stretch of interstate is the most deadly.
So they broke down numbers over a 5-year span, and they found that I-4 has the highest death per mile average of any highway in the U.S.
With around 2,000 crashes since 1963, which sounds like a lot until you think that 1963 was 61 years ago. That's like 32 crashes a year. Not deaths, just crashes. But in 2007, the Department of Transportation reported 440 crashes in this area between 1999 and 2006. Note again that this is the number of crashes. Then in 2010, the East Regional Planning Council did a presentation about the I-4 dead zone. They said that between the years of 2006 and 2008, there were only 22 crashes, and only 2 of those resulted in death. They compared this area to other more popular areas which had higher numbers of crashes and obviously higher numbers of deaths. But people like to play with the numbers to make things sound more important than they might be. So if you look at each of the areas and take the percentage of crashes that resulted in death, the I-4 dead zone doubles all of the other areas presented with a whopping 9% death rate of 22 crashes. That's 2 deaths in 3 years. But it sounds a lot better when I say that it was double the other areas, didn't it? And even the 9% doesn't sound too shabby. But even if the ghosts of the settlers aren't causing the accidents, and it's just a matter of heavy traffic and human error, it still doesn't explain why people say their cell phones and electronics act weird. They say that as they're driving through the area, talking on their phones, they hear a third voice on the phone real quick. Could the signals maybe be getting mixed up? Maybe. But there's a theory that cell phones can be influenced by the Earth's magnetic changes, and I looked it up. And there is a high level of magnetism in the area, But this only would have been remotely possible with older cell phones that had a magnetic hard drive. Now our phones have solid state drives, which don't use magnets. But again, all based on paranormal theories. So let's say one night you're driving down the road, you're heading east towards Sanford, and as you approach the bridge, you see a girl walking along the side of the road. As you pass her, you decide to give her a lift, so you slow down and pull over. But when you check your rearview mirror, no one's there. You turn around in your seat, look out the back window, still no one. Where'd she go? This has happened to multiple people over the years since the road opened, and no one knows who these ghostly hitchhikers are. One theory is that they're the ghosts of the people who have died in car accidents here over the years, trying to warn people about something or get their attention for some reason. Which reminds me about the ghost truck that people say they see. Remember when the road first opened and that first day there was a shrimp truck that jackknifed? If people are seeing a ghost truck that disappears in this area, the same area that the truck stopped moving, could this ghost truck be that same truck stuck in some sort of time loop, replaying itself over and over, but sometimes there's someone else on the road to see it? What do you think? Speaking of repeating events, the legend of the I-4 dead zone claims that Hurricane Donna changed directions when the fill dirt was dropped onto the graves. But that isn't the only hurricane that the legend claims is caused by ghosts here. It also claims that Hurricane Charlie in 2004 was brought through this area by ghosts as well. Why? Well, in 2004, the St. John's Bridge was being expanded to add 2 additional lanes, more construction in the area of the graves. The legend makes the assumption that the ghosts influence a hurricane to come through the area when there's construction. Well, they've been doing construction in the area of the graves since the fall of 2023. So what does that mean for this year's hurricane season? Hopefully, it's just correlation to bolster the legend. Have you had any experiences in the dead zone? I'm sure I'm not the only one here who would love to hear about it. So tell us about it in the comments. And speaking of comments, I put a link to a poll in the comments and the description. Do you think we'll get another ghost-influenced hurricane this year because of the construction? Yay or nay? I'll let you know once the hurricane season is over this fall. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed this episode of the Faerellia Files, where we talk about all things unsolved and unearthly. I'll see you guys next time.